वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह। सूरा सो पे चानिए जो लड़े दीन के हेत, पुरजा कट मरे खबू न चढ़े खेत. These lines by Bhagat Kabir ji are so apt for the valiant, the human rights defender Jaswant Singh Kalra. Born in Punjab just a few years after the 1947 partition, he was a strong advocate of democratic and civil rights and a highly respected leader of the Sikh community. His upbringing as a Sikh of Guru Nanak taught him to stand up against injustice to anyone and everyone. As a true follower, he didn't limit his stance to Punjab or to any of the Sikhs, but lent his voice over to whoever he could help. Growing up, his Bapuji told him stories of warriors like Mai Pago, Bhai Singh, and Bhagat Singh. He was truly inspired by these legends, who fearlessly fought for their rights, sacrificed their lives, but did not abandon their faith at any cost. Both of his grandfathers are freedom fighters and had dedicated their lives to winning freedom from the British rule. Hearing about the sacrifices of his ancestors, he could only imagine the struggle of thousands of people from Punjab, including both of his grandmothers, who had faced hardships, raising their families as lone mothers when their husbands had left home to join the struggle for freedom. Jaswant Singh felt extremely proud and more inspired than ever to do great things and grew up to add to the legacy of his family and the village. As an active student union leader, he got involved in the political fields and organized several protests supporting the rights for the lower economic class. His clarity of thoughts and the power of his words inspired many friends to join him in this mission. After the 1984 genocide and other pogroms in which thousands of innocent Sikhs died, the Punjab police were authorized to arrest Sikhs for any reason as suspected revolutionaries. When some of Jaswant Singh's friends had gone missing, he investigated the disappearances. He found out that thousands of innocent Sikhs had been unlawfully killed and cremated by the police without any records. As a human rights activist, he highlighted this injustice of the government of India on a global platform and continued his mission despite death threats from authorities. Sadly, it had become the reason for his very own disappearance and killing. He lost his life fearlessly standing up for the unfortunate victims of state oppression. A candle in the dark, he represented everything that a human rights defender should be. During the 1947 partition, many lives were lost, and millions of Punjabis were evacuated along the religious lines. While reading this book, I could feel the emotions as I remembered my Nani ji telling me about her family struggle during the 1947 Punjab partition. Till date, she talks about her family struggle. Till date, she talks about the bravery her father showed, protecting his family and bringing them safely to the other side without sacrificing an ounce of the Sikh he was. The independence from the British rule pushed Punjab back economically, socially, and academically by decades as the Indian government enforced a countrywide policy of centralization of power. Issues such as poverty, economic development, and class equity couldn't be addressed due to things now being in the central government's control. The 1971 war brought even more evacuations from many villages in Punjab. Once again, the state unnecessarily bore the brunt for these wars in terms of economic destruction and loss of life. A few years later, Punjab was again divided based on language. The government denied the recognition to Punjab as a Punjabi language state, even though it's organized other states based on their native languages. This was unacceptable to Sikhs as they identified themselves with Punjabi and the Gurmukhi script. This is when the movement Punjabi Suba was launched, demanding the establishment of a Punjabi-speaking state. After a long-drawn political protest in the Punjab Reorganization Act of 1966, the government partially agreed to the demands. Another significant movement called Anandpur Sahib Resolution was a series of peaceful mass demonstrations. The main political aim of this movement was the predistinction of Khalsa through creation of a friendly environment. It was also appealed for decentralization of power so Punjab could be given more independence. Us Sikhs have a long-standing history of fighting injustice and their social rights. From our fight for justice against the Mughals to the great sacrifices of Khalsa Panth. From the 1947 partition to the human rights violations in the 1990s. From the 9/11 attacks that had made us victims to escalating hate crimes to the mass shooting at the Gurdwara in Oak Ridge, Wisconsin. From the farmers' protests in India to this very moment, Sikhs have continuously been fighting for themselves and others. All this reminds me of what Guru Nanak Dev Ji said. The farmers' protest was a reminder from Sikh history of fight against oppression, and a true example of the strong mindset the Sikh community should have of facing any challenges on their rights and liberties. Sikhs have led similar protests in the past against the central government calling for better government support of agriculture. But it's extremely sad that a country that is a democracy use and endorse violence against its own citizens with their undemocratic actions. One thing is certain, Sikhs will always stand united against injustice. People all over the world came together in support of the farmers, which encouraged unity amongst them, irrespective of their religious or political preferences. The message of humanity taught by our gurus is to be aware of justice and to respond to any injustice. The lesson learned is loud and clear. In order to succeed in a struggle, one doesn't need to be violent. It wasn't easy to sit on the roads facing scorching heat and bitter winter, attacks from state forces, and even a deadly second wave of COVID. Despite the sufferings, the farmers didn't retaliate with violence. They shared their food with the underprivileged and even fed the police that had attacked them. This shows a huge amount of compassion, forgiveness, and a desire for the greater good. 700 lives were lost during the protests, but in short, success didn't come that easy. But by sticking with their convictions and risking their lives, the farmers ensured a better world for all of us. As a young Sikh myself, I take inspiration from our gurus, our history, and great personalities like Jaswant Singh Kalra himself. I would like to conclude my speech with the words from his last speech. He said, the Khalsa was inaugurated to protect human rights, the human rights of the world. And if you cannot protect your own human rights, you will not be able to give any definition of Khalsa in the world. Sasagaji, Pochak Maaf Karna, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.